All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Today, we have a banger of all bangers. No, we have a really good show tonight. We have Jason with Cask Nation, and we are going to talk about all the cool stuff that they're doing over there, but also we're going to get a little nerdy about some whiskey. And I think the cool thing about what we're going to talk about tonight is the future of independent bottling. And I don't know if Jason, if you're ready to go down that road yet, but we're going to talk a little bit about what the future lies, because you know, Scotland and other places around the world have been independent bottling for a long time, and they see nothing wrong with it. Why is it such a thing now? And then you can introduce yourself. Why is it such a thing now with between you guys and Lost Lantern? And I know there's a couple of others out there. Why is it just now becoming a thing in America?
Yeah, no, I think that's a terrific question. It's the question that Joshua and I asked ourselves back in 2010. Which is, why isn't this done in America? And way back then, we were already fans of independent bottling. We were supporting the Cadenheads of the world. We were following the Gordon MacPhails, the Signatories, the Blackadders, way back then. And it was interesting, once we actually started looking into it here in the US, we started hearing more and more about rebottling and white labeling. And I think, you know, if you come at this with the Scottish tradition in mind, you think about single casks, whether cask strength or not, but with a distillery name front and center. And I think if you come to it with that in mind, you see America kind of painting itself into a corner where casks being purchased, going into warehouses, coming out with new marketing stories, new designs, new brands. There wasn't the same, to my mind, there wasn't the same homage to the producer, right? At that point, a producer was just making whiskey, and you could do anything you wanted with it, and you could stick it out into the world so long as their name was nowhere near it. Right. And I've tried to at least concede that it's two ways of doing a similar business, but not an identical business. And I think someone like David Perkins with High West, like I think he really started putting this idea of independent bottling where you've got a particular perspective, a particular point of view. And we always talk about David at High West in the same way we talk about John Glazer and Compass Box, right, over in London. And they really wanted to bring flavor profiles to the consumer. And I really think they were a bridge on the way to, as you rightly point out in your question, this rise of straight up American independent bottling or America-based independent bottlers, where Nora and Adam, Jason and Joshua, you know, others out and about, have a responsibility to the distiller. And that's where we've wanted to say, hey, if you like this, it was made by them. You know, get on board with that distiller over there. Right. Support that distiller. And you hear it, you know, Josh and I have done this on the podcast. You hear this from Jess Lomas for us over in Glasgow. You hear us championing Westland. You hear us championing Virginia Distillery Company. You hear us championing Clear Creek, right? Balcones, Few, right? I could keep going on here.
Absolutely.
Right. But you hear us championing those distilleries. And it's not just enough to get the liquid from them and then release a brand behind it. We really want to have people learn about them and help with the rise of American single malt whiskey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, you were gracious enough to send over a couple of samples, and I opened up the first sample, which I can't pronounce, and I'm not going to, because I'm going to butcher it, because I'm a Texas redneck. Like, just leave me alone. But it's a 17-year-old
I
Scotch.
trust you, Randall. I think you could say Mannockmore.
Mannockmore.
There you go.
Okay.
Easy
Mannockmore
peasy.
17. This is a refill char cask red wine finish. Am I?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I thought this would be kind of fun for
Okay.
it.
And I will let you know. I don't know if you did a little research before you got on here, but I am a huge Scotch fan. I'm a huge American single malt fan.
Brilliant.
I love all whiskey, right? But there's something about Scotch and now going into American single malt that it takes me back to a memory, a fond memory, luckily, of just like, I don't know. I feel like the Scottish people, especially, they don't take themselves as serious as the American whiskey makers. Am I correct in that?
I would concede that point. Yeah, I'd like
Yeah.
to. I'd like to believe that that's true at least.
Right. I mean, I understand bills need to be paid, and we
Yes.
got to make whiskey and stuff like that. But I feel like all the videos that I've seen of Scottish distilleries, or when you guys are talking to people at these distilleries, it's more about the storytelling than it's about the freaking whiskey, right? It's more about that. It's not so much like it's an amazing dram. Don't get me wrong, but it's nothing to do with really what's in the glass. It's more about the history behind it and the folklore and the deep stories and the accents that you can't really pinpoint and stuff like that. That's what to me what Scotch has over American whiskey in general, because of the simple fact, they got the years behind them, which bourbon's been around for a while, and that's great, and they're developing a story, but 100 years, if you think about 100 years, it's a splash in the bucket, really, when it comes to Scotch, right? I mean, Scotch has been doing it for a long time. There's some records date back well into the 1700s, right? So
correct.
So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, these guys have been doing it for over 300 years. They know their way around a still, and they're doing it very traditional way. So tell us a little bit about this particular dram that we're having together, and why you guys picked it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of different ways to come at this. I think number one, and it's so perfect. This happens to us on our podcast as well. You set me up so beautifully for the tradition of Scotch, and I'm going to walk in here and pour you from a distillery that was founded in 1971. So I've set you up perfectly. So we're already good friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Pranking each other in the early stages of this episode. So Mannockmore, Diageo owned powerhouse distillery. Numbers are forever changing, but approximately 4.5 million liters of alcohol produced annually, destined for Diageo blends. So this is the perfect intro to the Scottish style independent bottling that we're talking about tonight, which is there are no official releases of Mannockmore. So there's no 12-year-old for me to point you to. There's no official 17-year-old. If you want to get to know Mannockmore, component of Diageo blends like Johnny Walker, so I think Haig sometimes gets mentioned here. If you want to gain access to that distillery, you need to find some cask that's been put out by an independent bottler. And so here we sit tonight, Mannockmore.
Absolutely.
The other entry point here is this isn't a style of cask that normally Joshua and I would run away from.
Okay.
Which is red wine. When you see the red wine there, we don't tend to find success with red wine maturation, red wine finishing. Oftentimes a whiskey tastes winey. The red wine and the Scotch kind of sit separately from one another like oil and water. But I think this one has a particular word that really piqued our interest, which is charred. It has charred red wine. So now what you've got are those red wine sugars are going to be caramelized. So the way we talk about the Maillard reaction, when you put, as a proud Texas man, when you put your steak into your screaming hot cast iron,
Mhm.
That surface that touches the screaming hot cast iron engages in the Maillard reaction. And those sugars brown, they caramelize, they deepen, they richen. And that's what we have got with this maturation. So you take Mannockmore, which as a spirit is quite fruity, quite malty, quite heavy. And then you finish it in that charred red wine cask. You're matching like with like there. And
Mm.
now you've got, instead of just having grapes, now you've got rich red fruit.
Right.
Now you've got the type of red fruit you might find in a cobbler or a cherry pie, or,
Mhm.
even when you bring in that deep, rich, buttery crust of a pie. Now
Mhm.
you've got that going on in the whiskey as well. And so we really loved the way that all aspects of this deepened and became richer. And then what did we say for this strength? 53%. Um, it also has a little surprising note. And it's one of those ones, depending on the context, depending on the order, depending if it's the first whiskey of the
Right.
day, sometimes it's a little surprise you get, sometimes you don't. Mm. But we did pop it on the label. And so just like I was showing the front label a moment ago,
Right.
we also do what we call the flavometer. And so that's like our little music equalizer over there.
Right.
And then we have some truncated uh, terms up here, some
Mhm.
truncated descriptors. And so the flavometer is floral, sweet, rich, nutty, spicy, earthy, smoky, oaky. And we give those a score out of 10. Sweet and rich score highly here. Earthy and oaky score high. But it has a little surprising, out of 10, we gave it 3 notches on smoky,
I was fixing to say that, like,
right?
it does give me a little bit of that smoky note, and this is the first whiskey of the day for me, but it's like, it's not, I mean, if you didn't tell me there was smoke in here, I'd be like, okay, it's just the charred cask,
Right,
right? It
right.
might just be that, but there is something there. And as soon as you said like Johnny Walker, it made me think of like Johnny Walker Black, how it has
Mm,
smoke, but it's not overly smoked, but there is some there.
gotcha.
It made me think of that, but this is so much richer and denser and just
Right.
so much flavor in here. And you're right about like the cherry pie with the really buttery crust and like the malt, the complexity of the malt that's there is just really nice. And that is what's so cool to me. And other people might be like, why would you do that? Where you guys would seek out a brand that doesn't normally do 17-year-old whiskey. They're just like, we're making 8-year-old whiskey, throwing it out into a blend. It's whatever. But like, I seek those out because when they do it right, it is absolutely phenomenal. And
Right.
that's what we're getting in this glass right here. And I'm glad I only poured a very small sample, because as you well know, being a man of the podcasting world, that when you're having a dram over a Zoom or a StreamYard, it's great and I love doing it, but there's something about sitting back, having the dram by
Oh, yeah.
yourself,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just letting it envelop you. Maybe you're watching a show on TV or conversating with your wife or whatever, and you're just able to really let that whiskey envelop you. And that's what I love to do, and that's why I like to keep at least half a sample to where I can go back and just sit with it and maybe even write down notes. I'm not that nerdy. I don't write down notes all the time, but sometimes if it really sticks out, or if I'm maybe doing a review of it, I'll write down a bunch of notes. But this one to me is the perfect example of like I just said, one of those power horse distilleries that can also make some really cool whiskey.
Well, and that's the thing we always like to point out. So we talk about championing the distillery, right? Now, there's really no money in it for Diageo if Jason and Josh are out here championing Mannockmore. But what it does do is it shows you that's what's happening at that powerhouse distillery, right? That's just the malt that they're making there. And I'm as much of a snob as anybody, and I grew up in a blue collar family where bottom shelf blends in plastic jugs were the order of the day. And once I went to university and joined the Whiskey Society, oh, now I'm a man of single malt, and it's easy to start. Once you learn single malt Scotch, you go, oh, blends, oh, who drinks blends? And it's really taken me time to come full circle and say,
Mhm.
but what's wrong with that malt? That goes
Absolutely.
into a blend. That's 30% of a blend. That's your
Right.
top notes in a
Mhm.
blend. Like, that's doing so much heavy lifting.
Mm.
And I think to poo-poo what ends up in blends is a mistake. And
No,
it's a mistake that
absolutely.
we make when we're young and we're learning and we want to be experts. And it takes us time to just calm down, come back to reality, and remember that good whiskey is good whiskey and it's being produced in a number of different places.
Absolutely. And that brings me kind of to my next question. What got you into whiskey? I mean, other than
Mm.
being around it, but like, obviously no, most people don't just start a whiskey brand, and most people don't just start a whiskey podcast. They have some pre-knowledge before that maybe this is something they want to do.
Yeah. I definitely grew up thinking I did not like whiskey. Being around all of those bottom shelf blends that were being mixed with water or mixed with ginger ale or whatever it was, I just thought, no, that's not for me. And it was actually meeting a Finnish chap, Petty Pirine, and still a dear friend to this day. It was meeting Petty when he and I were both brand new to the University of Aberdeen. We were both 22 years old,
Oh wow.
and Petty had said, I'm Finnish, I'm in Scotland, I'm going to go to the Whiskey Society. Do you want to come along? And I thought, I really don't like whiskey, but I'm new to this place. In an attempt to meet a friend, I'll come with you. And then he and I started our whiskey journey together. And I say it in a few of my tastings, we met Glenfiddich, and Glenfiddich was the first whiskey for me that didn't taste anything like the whiskey I'd grown up around. And I thought, oh, there's something here. And then Petty and I met Highland Park,
Mm.
and we said, Glenfiddich, it's us, it's not you. And then we embraced Highland Park. And then there was a night in the Aberdeen Whiskey Society. Petty and I were sitting there, 8 pours in front of us, and we got to this one that was really rich and really smoky. And Petty looked at me and said, Finnish sauna. And I said, Petty, mate, I'm blue collar Ayrshire boy. I don't know Finnish sauna. And he said, well, this is Finnish sauna. So this was the fall of 1996.
Okay.
Cut to summer of 2000. Petty and I both graduated. I'm on a trip inside the Arctic Circle, very northern Finland, for Midsummer Fest with my wife, visiting Petty, Midsummer Fest, a lot of drinking. We walk in to the Finnish sauna. I walk into my first ever Finnish sauna, and I go, Lafroig 10. And that was the dram back in Aberdeen, back in 96, that Petty and I, once we had Finnish sauna, Lafroig 10, it was like, holy shirt balls, like this. Honestly, Randall, as I sit here today, that changed my life. That was an absolute game changer for me. And that whiskey was a part of my DNA from that moment on. So fall of 96, then it was into teaching philosophy, which I did professionally for 13 years. But the whole time I taught philosophy, whiskey was in the background. I
Wow.
I started a whiskey society. I started a whiskey blog. I was just happy to be around it, just happy to share it. Um, and then it was 2010, Thanksgiving 2010, when Joshua reached out over the phone, and it turns out he and I had known each other 6 months, and he had said over the phone, "Tell me if I've had a crazy idea. Just tell me how crazy I am. And I knew what he was going to say. And he said, I want to start an independent bottling company. And I said, that's a brilliant idea. And he said, I want you to be a partner. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then that was the beginning of going professional in this realm, and sourcing cask globally, adding on the podcast, really started to blog over at Single Cask Nation as well, and
Mm-hmm.
then traveling the country doing this. That was really taking it to the next level. And then just to land the plane on this story, in 2019 for Joshua, and then 2022 for myself, because of the pandemic,
Yeah,
we were made keepers of the Quake. And so that's an honor for global service to
absolutely.
Scotch whiskey. And so to go from 1996 talking to a Finnish guy about making a friend to 2022 when I'm back at Blair Castle in Pitlochry being, inaugurated as a keeper. Like, phenomenal, unbelievable journey. And
Mm,
that's whiskey.
yes.
It's people, it's tradition, everything you rightly said, and it's support, and it's passion, and it's fun, and it's sharing. That that's Scotch whiskey. That's
Abs-
whiskey writ large.
yeah.
But that's Scotch whiskey for me.
Wow. Wow. I don't know if I've ever heard a story that's more invigorating for somebody like myself, because it's just basically get in there and do it, right?
Yeah.
And just deep dive it and go head first, and you know what? Just push forward. And so yeah, no, it's super cool, but it's also like it's a testament, because obviously it wasn't all roses the whole time you were doing it, right? I'm sure in the
Unfortunately
early
not.
yeah, in the early days, I'm sure when you guys were trying to get how do you go about like to walk us through that first cask that you
Yeah.
procured from somebody, and like what do you even do? Like, okay, now we have a barrel of whiskey. What do we do with it?
It's so funny because you're asking the question in the way Joshua and I talk about it, in looking back upon it, like, how did we do that? Like, there's it's funny. We sometimes reference Donald Rumsfeld's um, unknown unknowns,
Mhm.
and we sometimes talk about, if we had known what we didn't know, we may not have done what we did. Um, the chutzpah of two bloggers. Joshua was selling industrial components.
Right.
I was teaching philosophy. We had two blogs. We could speak to Richard Patterson over Twitter. We could speak to John Campbell over Twitter, and we thought we owned the whiskey world. You know, um, what actually did happen? I would say the first cask was actually the easiest, and it
Oh, I'm
got more
sure.
difficult after that, which was, we were very good friends with a chap, Andy Hogan. And Andy Hogan had moved from Bruichladdich to Arran. And I can't remember how we met Andy. I'm sure Joshua met him, and then the three of us got to know each other. But we were big supporters of Arran. They were imported by Impex into
Mhm.
America, and I grew up in Ayrshire, as I said earlier. I grew up across the Firth of Clyde from Arran. So in '95, Arran came online, days before my 21st birthday.
Oh, there you
It
go.
was it was remarkable. What, June 29, maybe 2 days after my
Mhm.
21st birthday, and so Arran came online. So Arran's always been special to me. And so we met Andy Hogan, and we were tasting Arran. We were visiting Arran. We were just having a lovely time around Arran. And through Andy, we found out there were a few casks in the warehouse that were ex-bourbon Arrans, unpeated ex-bourbon Arrans, that had been moved into Pinot Noir casks. And Andy let us taste them. And Joshua and I were like, yes, yes, we need to have our names on one of these. And so we spoke with Aaron, Ewan Mitchell, who's there to this day, Louisa Young, who was there at that point. I think it's still with them today. She's there on and off having her family, so power to her. And when we spoke to them, they said, we want to be the first cask bottled by single Cask Nation. And Josh and I privately, not in the meeting, but privately, were like, what do they see? We're two jamokes trying to do a thing, and they're on board. What are they seeing? And if they see it, we should begin to see it.
Absolutely.
And it was an amazing moment when someone having faith in us gave us faith in ourselves. And we were like, we can do this. And so we had the Aaron on board, and we knew it was the Pinot Noir. We were able to speak to Sam Filmus at Impex, owner, one of the co-owners at Impex. He spoke to us about importing the bottled cask. I think it was bottled by Aaron. So we didn't need to take it to a bottling hall. We could bottle it at Aaron. I think I'm remembering that correctly. And so we had Aaron on board. Then it was, well, we have to launch with 3 casks. One isn't really going to launch a company.
Right.
And so we had reached out to Anthony Wills at Kilchoman. Anthony Wills, again, we shared an importer. They shared an importer with Aaron. And so Sam Filmus was able to make an introduction. We were able to go over, and we saw Anthony, in perhaps the weakest moment he's had in his adult life, said yes to selling us a cask. And to this date, and I think I'm correct in saying this, we're the only independent bottler to have ever put out a Kilchoman in our livery with the Kilchoman name on it.
Wow.
Scotch Malt Whisky Society have a number for Kilchoman,
Right.
and they've put out Kilchoman. And then, I'm not going to name names, but a retailer in the UK got some bottles in Kilchoman livery that they moved over into their own livery, and that was a bit naughty.
Yes.
And basically, after selling to us, Anthony got so many calls from other independent bottlers, he stopped selling to all independent bottlers. And so, like, nothing that we did. He loved the bottling that we did. He loved working
Right.
with us. He just didn't want to keep answering phone calls to sell casks when he was trying to build his brand. So Anthony shut it down. But so now we had a Kilchoman. So holy moly, now we've got an Aaron, we've got a Kilchoman. And then we reached out to the Benriach Distilling Company, Ali Walker over there, son of Billy Walker. And we spoke to them, and we went over to their offices, and we lined up samples of Benriach and samples of Glendronach. And we selected the Benriach first, 17-year-old peated Benriach. We got that sorted. And then again, we only had so much money. And so as we were trying to line up the Glendronach for future, the relationship started to change, and they kind of shut down cask sales as well. And we never did get our hands on the Glendronach, even though we were literally at the distillery picking up samples, tasting on site with the distillery manager at Glendronach. This was 2012, maybe March of 2012. Great trip, great experience. Didn't turn into Glendronach, which was a bummer, but it then meant we came out. So our first go around was an Aaron 12 partial maturation in Pinot Noir, a Kilchoman 4 full maturation in fresh bourbon, and then a Benriach 17-year-old peated. That's how we came out the gates. And we say it all the time. It took us 22, 23 months to sell through the Kilchoman. It was $95 a bottle. We were creating a market as we were selling to it. So we were talking to people about independent bottling. We were talking about, I remember doing a tasting at Google, young people, right? Knowledgeable people. Who's heard of Aaron? Nobody. Who's heard of Kilchoman? Nobody. Who's heard of Benriach? Nobody. And so you're not only talking about independent bottling, you're not only talking about single casks, you're not only talking about cask strength, you're talking about the home distillery, and you're putting the home distillery on the map. And again, because of our relationship with Sam Filmus, we were pouring official Arran and official Kilchoman when we were pouring our independently bottled Arran and Kilchoman, and then the Benriach on the end. And in a very funny moment, somebody once came up to me after tasting and said, I like your Arran, but I don't really like their Arran. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you, it's all their Arran.
It's all
I
the same.
I don't own an Arran distillery anywhere. It's all theirs. And I said to them, what I'm hearing though is you're liking the Pinot Noir on it. You're liking the cask strength on it. So twig to that, pay attention to that. But if you like our Arran, you may very well like their Arran at cask strength. So, it was still a job of carefully letting people know what it meant to be an independent bottler, still supporting the home distillery, still letting people know we're nothing without bricks and mortar distilleries. I'm never going to badmouth a bricks and mortar distillery. And if you say you like my Arran but not theirs, I'm not going to let you away with that. I'm going to have to tell you that it's all theirs. So
exactly.
yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, and that's the cool thing about what you and a lot of other independent bottlers are doing. You're showcasing their whiskey. The only thing you're doing is maybe picking some cherry barrels, right? You might be picking some, oh man, this one to me is amazing, right? You might that may be all you're doing, because you have to think about single barrels in themselves are inherently different from each other. We know that. But also, like, it's not really a good money making plan to sell a single barrel when you can sell a 20,000 bottle blend, right? It'd be a whole lot easier to do that. You don't have to use as much, and it's easier to blend it, and you can get kind of the funkiness out and stuff like that. Whereas a single cask is just that. It's the raw whiskey as it is. And I'm guessing you're like everybody else that does it non-chill filtered, no color added, all the things, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct,
So it really goes to show this is what, if I'm not going to throw Dalmore out there, but like, this is what it would taste like with, the way we would produce it. And so just because, like you were saying earlier, just because you like our Arran, that doesn't mean that you're not going to like theirs. They just, they do add water to it and, whatever, so it does make it a little bit different, obviously. But I've always said there's something with a single cask of whiskey that just really showcases what that distillery can do. And especially with the one we had just had, it really shows like a workhorse distillery can put out some absolutely fantastic whiskey. And I can't thank you enough for sending that sample over again. It just really goes to show, like, people, like you said, they want to poo-poo some of these brands and they don't need to. And it's really cool that for your first go out, you had some of the biggest names in Scotch. Well, today, the biggest names in Scotch. Correct. And they were just like, yeah, sure. Take a thing. And you're like, okay, cool. And you were able to get it taken care of. Now, moving forward, obviously it gets harder because now you have stricter laws and there's things that you got to go through now. But now that you have a namesake, we'll call it that. And I'm pretty sure you do. You're pretty well known in the whiskey world, especially the Scotch whiskey world. And
thank you.
Is it easier for you to procure a cask? Let's say you wanted to go to Ardbeg and get a cask of Ardbeg. Would it be easier for you to get one of those? He's laughing.
Terrific question. Really terrific. Joshua and I literally discussed that distillery today. Literally. And it's so there's a couple of answers to the question, which is, Joshua and I had that conversation Thanksgiving 2010. We started sourcing cask 2011. We established in May of 2011, and we started sourcing for real in 2011. We started kind of signing deals into 2011, 2012. At that point, Springbank was one of the places on our list. And we went to Springbank and they said we stopped selling casks in 2010. You can then hear from my earlier story, Kilchoman then stopped selling casks. Benriach Distilling Company stopped selling casks. As Joshua and I went year over year, more distilleries stopped selling casks because they were trying to hit their own numbers. The demand was outstripping the supply. There
Right.
was no room. And we quote Mark Watt, who famously of Cadenheads, now is Watt Whiskey with his wife Kate. Mark said years ago, and we really are talking about a dozen years ago, Mark had said, in times of boom, independent bottlers are a pain in the butt. I'm
Yeah,
paraphrasing.
I can see that.
Uh, are a pain in the butt for bricks and mortar producers.
Right.
In times of slowdown, independent bottlers are their best friends. And Joshua and I created an independent bottling company when the industry was on the precipice of blowing up. And our whole experience has been trying to pick up crumbs while the bricks and mortars said, thanks, but we don't really need you right now. And
Absolutely.
so casks, went up in price because their number became scarce and the number of direct relationships became trickier. And so we did strike gold when we signed a deal with Diageo. And
Okay.
I would say that was probably around 2017, maybe. So we'd
Oh,
been in it for
wow.
a few years at that point. And once we got Diageo, we didn't have the Lagavulins of the world, we didn't have the Taliskers of the world, we didn't have Cragganmore, certainly didn't have Brora, Port Ellen, none of that, none of that. But if they were producing it and it was 3 years and above, there were about 10 distilleries and malt distilleries and a couple of grain distilleries that we had access to. And we just kind of tried to judiciously use those, place those, move those into some different casks of our own.
Mhm.
Um, and so we really kind of tried to chart that path. And all of this brings me around to answering your question, which is we're not yet to the point where distilleries are throwing their doors open, but we're getting there.
Right.
We're moving there. And when you start to hear Diageo ceasing production at Balcones
Yeah.
and ceasing production at Dickel, right? And you hear about Brown Forman running Glenglassaugh 6 months out of 12 and Benriach 6 months out of 12. Those are places where you can start in reintroducing yourself. Ardbeg, for your precise example, Ardbeg's not in that position. It's LVMH owned. You've got partnership with Glenmorangie.
Mhm.
They're still covering all of their bills, and they may slow down in house a little bit. They're not yet needing to move cash off. And then the final part of my answer is over our time doing this, we've heard from more producers saying you can have the liquid, you can't have the name. And
Mm.
so we have got things like Blackspot Bridge in the market, which if you Google it, it's near a very well known, very well regarded distillery. We have got Stones of Stenness, a standing stone circle on Orkney, that's kind of close to a particular distillery. And so there are those kind of places where I think producers have moved away from, some producers have moved away from the traditional Scottish model, which
Mhm.
was we've produced it, you go forth, sell it, stick the name on it, have at it, let people know
Right.
where it was made. To now, those producers have created brands of their own and
Mm.
they're protective of those brands. And so, Lagavulin is always a very famous example, where that malt team and those classic malts, they're so protective of that, that you just don't get access to Lagavulin. We have released one unnamed Lagavulin in our time, but with a Diageo, and that did not come from Diageo. That came from a broker,
Right.
and so in those moments you play the game because you don't want to sour a relationship,
Absolutely.
because in this industry you're playing the long game, and so respect your partners today. They'll circle back to you later when need be, but play the long game. So I'm very confident we will have a named Ardbeg in the future. It I don't know if it'll have anything to do with Single Cask Nation being well known or Jason and Joshua being keepers, but it will be based on human relations.
Hmm.
It will be there.
Yeah.
This whole industry is based on relations.
Well,
Um,
and it's really about the, you know, even over there in Scotland and all those distilleries that, and a lot of them have a lot of war wounds as well, from being bought up by this distillery, and then a
oh my
bigger
gosh.
distillery buys them, and then a bigger distillery buys them. And so they're literally just trying to keep the lights on. They're trying to just make their whiskey the best way that they can. But it also, like, it just goes to show that, like, the whiskey community in general, we're all pretty much here to uplift everybody, right? Like
Yes,
a rising tide raises all boats. It's that type of thing. There are some out there that are like, no, it's our way, and that's the only way. But and you just kind of stay clear of them a little bit and move around. But if I was a distillery, a well-known distillery, just name one, right? Balcones. You said Balcones. If I was Balcones, I would only want you to promote for me, because for one, that's a marketing budget I don't have to put out there. You're
exactly.
buying the cask, from me, so it's not like I had to bottle it, or maybe I did, or whatever. It doesn't matter, but you're buying the actual whole cask, so you're not just like buying a case of bottles or something like that. So you're buying the whole cask, and you're marketing and selling that whole cask. They already got paid for it, so it's kind of a win-win for them. But I understand why some distilleries don't want to do it, because then it turns into, now every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to call me and say, hey, I want a barrel too. I want a barrel too. And then it kind of takes away some of the mystique of that single cask, correct?
Right. I've definitely heard those words. There's no doubt about that. And that was one of the interesting things for us, collaborating with Aaron from day one, right? Aaron saw the marketing value. They saw two guys going around America, talking about their distillery on their dime.
Right.
Like it was super smart. And what I really liked was they believed we would create the market to
Mm,
sell to. And we then went back and we refilled the original casks that we emptied. And we bought other casks from Aaron. And that continued to be a rich relationship, and continues to be a rich relationship to this day. And
wow.
so they saw the value of that. We also had a moment. Um, it's another place where we were the only independent bottlers in the world doing it. But when we put the wild turkeys into the world, our bottle, our livery, the wild turkey name, when we actually sat down with Eddie Russell 100% saw the value of working with an independent bottler.
Absolutely.
Absolutely saw the value in somebody else introducing your distillery to their market.
Yes.
And I honestly, the day he said that, and we were sitting at the distillery when he said it, when you hear Eddie Russell champion the corner of the industry that you occupy, I had goosebumps.
I mean, yeah, that
I
I'd
literally
I'd
had
probably start
goosebumps
crying right
hearing that.
there.
Right, right. I felt so validated, and it was kind of like, why can't others see it like Eddie Russell sees it?
Mhm.
Like, wouldn't that be amazing? But again, right? It'll come back around again. Distilleries are going to have to sell. They're going to want their name to go into new places.
Hmm.
And, you talked about this earlier on, right? Scotch has got such a lengthy history. We've
Does.
seen all sides of this industry multiple times, right? If you don't know the future of Scotch, you haven't read any pages of any history books on Scotch, because it is so cyclical and it is so predictable. And as soon as we get periods of boom, we ride them as hard as we possibly can, and luxury collaborations enter into it, and all the old stuff comes out and gets sold for exorbitant amounts of money, and we slowly alienate the people who built us in the first place. And then we go, oh, we need to find new markets. Oh, we need to find new consumers. Like, yeah, you could have just respected the ones you had. Like,
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean, it's like humans to crap on what we love. Unfortunately,
right,
it is
right,
that is
right.
what we do. Like we love it so much we abuse it, and then next thing you know, we don't want it anymore, and then we realize we needed it. It's a very abusive relationship we have with our culture for sure. But
Right, right.
it also makes me think like, and people have talked about this for a long time, and I'm sure you've talked about it on your show as well. We are going into a whiskey glut, right? Where
Sure.
people have produced way too much whiskey, and there is whiskey they're selling it for cheap because they've just, especially American. There's a lot of these guys. When the boom was happening, I mean, they were dumping barrel after barrel after barrel after barrel, getting stuff out there in the market. Well, now the market is flooded
Yeah,
with
yeah.
no name whiskeys coming from the same source, like, and there's some weird brand and there's 15 different ones and it's all literally the same whiskey. And it's just, and so now for you, it's finding those cherry casks, right? Those ones that are just like, this is perfect. This is what we need. Um, Similar to that caveats me to my next thing. Similar to the Akatoshan 13 year that you
Oh,
sent
look at
over.
you,
Now this
pro
one says
level.
BB finished. I'm not 100% sure what that is.
Yep, very, very simple again. Bourbon barrel.
Bourbon barrel. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Hence the
And
coloring
actually,
of
it's
it
a
being
yeah,
extremely light.
yeah. And this is actually a second fill bourbon barrel
Oh wow.
uh, finish on this. Now, what you've got here, and I just want to point this out for the viewers here. So you'll have seen this bottle earlier. This is our retail livery. This is only available in retail. You must have a store owner to see this bottle. Whereas this is our online livery, hence the online exclusive.
Okay.
And this is the new livery that we just released last month or 2 months ago. This was in November.
Got it.
We released this new livery. And actually, all of these caricatures on the label, these are all real people who are in the nation.
That's awesome.
And so we wanted to pay homage to the people that supported us. 2026 will be our 15th anniversary. And
Lord,
so,
I am so happy to be the one millionth of a part of that, because to me, what you guys are doing and what independent bottlers across the world are doing is bringing to light distilleries that you might otherwise just kind of shun
yes,
off. So tell us a little
yes.
bit about this particular cask and why you guys chose it.
Yeah. So obviously, when we are wandering the world with single cask, people want to talk about the same 5 distilleries, and it's your Balvinis and your Macallans and your Springbanks and your Highland Parks and so on and so forth. And a lot of, what's that, 135 missing distilleries, 140
Yeah.
missing distilleries. To think that Scotch is 5 distilleries is a huge error. And so Auchentoshan, Lowlands, just outside Glasgow, we've never bottled one. We've never found the one that you again. This is what you and I are talking about, right? If I'm going to pitch you a single cask strength Auchentoshan, I want it to blow your socks off, and I
Yeah.
want you to go, I have seen this distillery in a new light, or whoa, this is my first ever, or oh wow, I hadn't heard of this distillery. And so we waited and we waited. We've been sampling a long time.
Right.
But we waited, and then this one came across. And on the nose, again, we're back to that S word again. No smoke on the nose at all. When Josh and I were sampling this. And then it hit our palates. And we both looked at each other and said, where did that come from? And and so an Auchentoshan with smoke on it, completely unexpected.
Whoa.
That's the response, right? That's the reaction. And you know, that's what Joshua and I said when we sampled the cask. And if we can say that while sampling it, we've got, you know, belief that the nation will say that when they taste it. And I poured this in Maryland a little bit ago and really surprised people. I took this up to the Palouse, Pullman, Washington, Moscow, Idaho, where I've got my own whiskey society dating from 2004. And I blew their socks off with this. And so that's what we're about. That's what we want to do. We want to surprise. And so you've got Auchentoshan is in the, you know, I'm not up on the latest name, but is it Suntory Global Holdings? It used to be Beam Suntory. I think Suntory Global now. But they own Auchentoshan, they own Glengarry, they own Ardmore, they own Bowmore, they own Lafroig. And so we think that one of their in-house smoky casks got used for this Auchentoshan. And so
it's not actually peated. It's not actually peated malt.
Exactly. And it's just, I've never had a smoky Auchentoshan
either. That's why when I saw that you had sent this over, I was like, okay. I mean, I'm all about trying, you know, unique different things. But then now that I have it on the palate, I'm like, are these still available online?
Well, bless you, Randall. Singlecasknation.com. This will probably run you about 130 at 13 years old. Single cask, and the cask strength on this is 60.6,
That's pretty
which
good.
is a pretty good number on that one. And so, yes, these are at singlecasknation.com. And this is the type of release for us where we knew when we bottled this, we're going to have to get this out to tastings. We're going to have to go on our own podcast, go on other people's podcasts, and talk about this one. We knew that when we selected it. Auchentoshan is not going to move a bottle by itself.
Right.
But when people start to hear why you bottled it, when people start to hear you say, wow, unprompted, then this is going to take on a life of its own. But that's been true for us for 15 years. And so we know that. We know how rewarding that can be. And honestly, your wow from earlier is why we do what we do. You know, when someone in the nation gets that and says, wow, that's why we do what we do. That's what this is about.
Well, and because, I mean, you have to think about it. You guys have been doing this for a minute. Like, I've been in the whiskey game for a while, but not near as long as you guys. And there becomes a time in it, and I feel it even in my daily grind, where it's like, why does it matter? Why am I even doing this anymore? Like, this is not fruitful. This is not filling my cup anymore. What do I do to make this better? And then you get somebody responding like I did, or the other day I got a review on Apple Podcast or whatever, and it said, this show really helped me get through a time where I was really hurting and blah, 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 whatever it was. Absolutely. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing, but it was personal. Absolutely. But, you know, and then I was like, oh, okay. And then that it's the same with you. Like, it gives you that fire to be like, absolutely, we need to go find another one of these today.
Exactly. This is also the one that I guarantee you, when this sells out 3 years from now, 5 years from now, this might take 2 years to sell out. 3 years from now, 5 years from now, folk will say, I heard you've got a smoky Auchentoshan. Is that still available? And we'll say, no, that sold out 3 years ago. But you only slept on it for 2 years. So you only just missed it.
I am literally going on your website right now to buy it. Anyway, I'm joking.
Thank you.
So, but because to me, okay, I mean, I need to get the first one as well, because it's a distillery. Like I said, one of those workhorse distilleries you won't think of. But this one, I've heard of them. I've had their triple
Right.
oak. I've had a couple of their other offerings, and they're good. They're
Right.
just not something I would even take to a tasting to somebody, right? Because they're going to be like, it's 43% Scotch. Like it's
Right.
not really, it's the flavor profile that's there. It's has a little bit of earthy notes to it, but there's really nothing that's gonna, but this, on the other hand, now again, this, like you said, this is a specific cask. This is very,
Mhm.
I wouldn't say off profile, but it's probably off profile for what
Oh
they
yeah.
do, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
also shows what they can do. And the fact that they're making the blend that they make, that's great. And they obviously have been doing it for a very long time. They know what they're doing, and they have loyal customers that buy their product day in, day out. So we can't poo-poo that. But to me, this one especially is just, it gives you just enough smoke to where, like there's a lot of American distilleries out there, not just single malt, not just Scotch, bourbon and rye, that are using like peated casks. One of the big ones, well, they don't use peated casks, but anyway, the SWA has knocked on a couple of people for using the term Isla, right? So, anyway, we're not going to talk, we're not here to talk about that, but it's one of those things where like they want to use these peated casks just to give a little bit extra to their whiskey, give a little bit of smoke to it. I even have a distillery inside that's it's finished in like 6 different barrels, and one of the barrels is a ex Isla peated barrel, but they didn't say, they said peated barrel. And you do a little research on their website and you find out that it's a Lefroy barrel. But anyway, that's the whole point. Like you almost have to go down the rabbit hole to truly know which one it is, which is kind of cool, but at the same time, and everybody's wanting to get this, but they don't want to go full on peated malt, right? Because peated malt is obvious. It's very upfront, and you know what's in there. So it's really cool that they were able to do this, and you still get enough smoke on it to where you're like, is that peated?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
No, like, and that's where it turns your head a little bit, and it makes you really kind of think about it. So one of the questions I wanted to talk to you about, since being an independent bottler, your transparency in everything that you do has to be very upfront. Is the transparency becoming just a buzzword now, or is it the principle that you walk behind?
For us, it was day one, right? And this is what Josh and I talk about. We came to this as whiskey geeks. Our retail labels say bottled by whiskey geeks for whiskey geeks the world over. And so coming from, the consumer realm where I was buying independently bottled whiskey, if a producer wrote matured in oak, it drove me bonkers, because all you have told me is a legal stipulation. You have
Right.
given me no information. Now, as time has gone on, I completely appreciate why somebody would have their label say matured in oak, because it makes life a damn sight easier than continually changing, continually looking up, continually checking the paperwork. Like it's a damn sight easier.
Yeah.
But it's a detail we missed as a consumer. And so it's a detail that we want to present to consumers like us. The other one that was always an influence for me, and sadly they recently declared bankruptcy after multiple decades. But way back in the day, Rogue Brewing out of Oregon, Rogue Brewing were one of the first brewers that I remember who would post their recipes, post their ingredients, and they would say, "What have we got to worry about? Like you're a consumer. We're spending the money on the equipment and the buildings and the fermentation vessels. If you want to make that as a home brewer, go crazy. It's not going to taste like what we're making in our pro setup day in and day out."
No.
And I really I took that to heart. And as an independent bottler, I'm more than happy to give as many details as I can, because you can't just walk out tomorrow and recreate single Cask Nation, right? It's
Mhm.
just not possible. And so, so partly we did it for being a consumer, and partly because what do we have to hide? We love transparency. I even love telling you red wine isn't a thing we look for, but
Right.
holy moly, charred red wine,
It's a
shook us,
thing.
right? Auchentoshan, tasting plenty of it, hadn't yet found the one. Boom, a smoky one went across the
There's the
table.
one.
Right, there you go. So it adds to what we're doing, and we always, I love what you're saying there about hearing from the listener. I would say one of the most consistent bits of feedback we receive is about our authenticity, and you can't create authenticity in a marketing lab.
No.
The brand team can't descend from above and make you authentic. You either are authentic and people pick up on it, or you're not.
Right.
And so the fact that people see us being authentic for all 15 years, and authentic when we were bloggers, and authentic when we were amateurs, yeah, I love that. I that means the world to me, and we're not changing that. That's who
Right.
we are.
Exactly. Exactly. So that kind of leads me to my next question. Since you guys have been doing this for a minute and you've had to talk to so many different distilleries, not only for the podcast, but for procuring barrels as well.
Yeah.
What was one of the lessons that you learned doing that? Maybe a question not to ask, or something like that, to where they're
Ah,
just, you see it in their face where they're just like, nope, no sale after this. Like, is there a lesson that you learned that really changed the way you guys kind of do business?
well, that's a good question. I've never been asked that question. That's fantastic. There is a funny one, but this changed how Joshua thought of me rather than a producer, um, which was when we had our first meeting with Ali Walker, Benriach Distilling Company, and their offices were just outside Edinburgh. We pulled up, we waited. Ali met us, took us into the office, and said, "Oh well, thanks for coming along, guys. Great to see you. Can I pour you a dram?" And I said, "Oh, no, thank you." And then Joshua gave me the side glance, like, the what? What? And to this day, Joshua still brings up that meeting. Like, remember the day you said no to a dram from Ali Walker? Like, yes, because you bring it up all the bloody
All the
time.
time. There's sometimes where you're just not feeling whiskey, right? And you're just like, hey, no, I'm good.
You absolute nut job. I would say we never had a conversation that turned because we said the wrong thing. But I
Right.
I would say, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school. It's been sold on twice since, but we started a great relationship with Stuart Nickerson and Ronnie Rutledge when they were Glenglassa, and
Mm.
they were responsible for reopening Glenglassa. Stuart Nickerson is a master of the Quaich, and actually nominated me and Joshua for keeperdom. So that speaks to the relationship we had. Well,
Yeah.
we have. It sounds like I'm foreshadowing in this story. It's the relationship we have
Have
actively
have
with
right now.
Stuart Nickerson as of today. And because of that relationship, he invited us to Glenglassa to look at casks. And at that stage, Glenglassa had been closed longer than it had been open. And it was
Mhm.
always open, close, open, close,
Yeah. Oh
open,
yeah.
close. And if you totaled the years, it had been closed longer than it had been open.
Right.
And so there was some 3-year-old Glenglassa floating around, and a lot of it was in red wine. And Josh and I, it didn't work for us.
Right.
They had done different things, they had different releases, they had different levels of success. It didn't work for me and Joshua for what we were looking for. There were some other casts offered, which were 1970s Glenglasses, and so, So, so on one side of the table we had the 3-year-old stock, and on the other side of the table we had the 30-plus-year-old stock, 40-year-old stock, and we tasted them and we discussed them, and we were never going to be able to afford them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a fledgling company, shoestring budget, and taking 22, 23 months to sell a $95 Kilhoman,
Yeah.
right? And so I that was a time where I thought we maybe got ahead of our skis. And Stuart was a gentleman to the end, and had no issue with us explaining, thank you, but he totally understand. He totally got it. But I felt like that was a place where we maybe could have saved the time, we could have saved the effort, we could
Right.
have saved him pulling those samples, pouring those samples. It was maybe a little disingenuous of us to believe we could pull that off. But I think that came from, we didn't know what we didn't know,
Right.
and we were throwing a lot of things at the wall. We actually have the opposite of that story as well, which is, when I was at University of Aberdeen, we would drive up to Glenfarclas. We would
Okay.
pick up an octave, we would put it in the trunk of the car, we'd drive it back to the halls of residence. We would then stick a plastic hose in the bung, start sucking until the whiskey came out, and then we'd put it in bottles, and we'd fill up bottles, and then we'd make labels on the closest printer, and we would glue those onto the glass, and we would sell those at the Aberdeen Whisky Society. Full bottle, cask strength, ruby red octave Glenfarclas, £22 a bottle.
Oh my
Um,
God.
so, so this was 97, 98, 99, that kind of time. And so when Josh and I started up, I said to Joshua, let me drop Glenfarclas a note and George Grant, right? Let me send him an email. And so I emailed George Grant and I say, hey George, I used to acquire casks, part of the Aberdeen Whisky Society, Aberdeen University Whisky Society. Um, I've started an independent bottler here in America. I'd love to talk about buying casks from you again. And he wrote back and he said, yeah, the octaves aren't a thing we do anymore. We're also not selling to independents, but come by the distillery and we'll say hi. And so again, this was March of 2012. We were in Scotland. We went to the distillery, and George met us, toured us around. We then go into the boardroom, and George says, we were with our at that point third partner Seth, and he says to Seth, "When were you born?" And Seth goes, "Oh, 1968." Oh, okay. Josh, I never asked, when were you born? He goes, 1973. Jason, when were you born? I'm the youngest. I'm the baby, 1974. And he went, "Oh, all right. Make yourselves comfy." And he kind of went a wee bit out of sight. And after a few minutes, he comes around the corner, and he's got 3 glasses of whiskey and a can of Coke. And he goes, Seth, this is the 1968 family cask. Joshua, this is the 1973 family cask. Jason, this is the 1974 family cask. The Coke's for me. And, and so he sits down, and we're just chatting away. And he goes, all right, so talk to me about the cask. And so we'd mocked up a label, we'd kind of shown it, we'd kind of been respectful and put just like a regular font across,
Mhm.
so showing Glenfarclas in their livery. And he went, all right. He says, if we were to do this, I would have one caveat. And we were like, oh boy, here it comes. It's like firstborn.
Mhm.
It's, like rebuild a corner of the distillery for him. Like, what is this going to be? And he goes, I would want our distillery name and our font across your label. And we were like, yeah, totally. What's the caveat? And He went, that's my one caveat. And we went, it's done.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was like,
Done.
he says, oh, I don't see why we can't make this work then. And it was, and we're just, we're looking at each other like, I'm holding a 1974 family cask. You're holding a 1968. He's just agreed to sell us casks of named Glenfarclas with their proprietary font on our label.
Like,
Does it get better than this?
What are we doing?
No. Took us 5 years to get that over the finish line. We released that in 2017 after agreeing to it March of 2012. And that was a place where a lot of conversations with Sazerac, a lot of conversations around pricing, a lot of conversations around bottling, a lot of conversations about importation, a lot of conversations over distribution, tons and tons and tons of conversations. And what we ended up doing was actually combining 2 casks of Glenfarclas, because we could get pricing on double casks that we could not get on single cask. And so we went that route, and Double Cask Nation was born. And it still had the Glen. And actually, I was just doing a tasting in LA in November. Like, gosh, how did the year end? Maybe I was in LA in November. I was in LA in November. And one of our longtime OG Nation members brought a bottle of the Glenfarclas Double Cask Nation to share with the room. And that's the Nation, right? That's how the Nation operates.
Absolutely.
And everyone toasted him, and he said, no problem at all.
Yeah.
We're all here to enjoy good single cask Nation whiskey. So there you go. So the industry can turn one of 2 ways, right? You can get in over your head. You can also get the most amazing yes that you never imagined.
Well, and I think it's just being at the right place at the right time and saying the right thing, right? Like being like, yeah, we'll do whatever we need to do. Like you're expecting the worst. You're like, okay, I'm gonna have to live here now or whatever, and they're asking one simple thing. So that puts me, and I know we're running short on time, but I do want to get into this last one, because this one to me holds a special place in my heart. But the last question is, the second to the last question is, how the heck did you procure this one? And tell us a little bit about, and those of you who are listening and watching at home, I am fixing to pour the smallest of sample, because I'm going to do a full review on this one for sure, of the Lafroig 25 single cask at 58.3% alcohol. What are we doing?
Yeah, this is brilliant, because this brings our story fully up to date, which is when we last spoke to our intrepid hero, the cask pricing was going rapidly north, and more distilleries were closing their doors to cask sales. So we moved through the pandemic. We benefited. Tons of people were buying tons of whiskey. We famously put out a 24-year-old pre-fire Kentucky bourbon, who had a very famous fire in the late 90s. And we put out 1,200 bottles of that at $295 a bottle, and sold it out in 9 minutes. And Josh and I joke to this day, we knew within 30 seconds that we'd priced it wrong.
You could have priced it for double that.
And at that point, that horse is bolting across the fields with its mane on fire, and there's nothing you can do. So I'm not going to lie, right? Transparency, like we made out okay in the pandemic. Where it did hurt us is we couldn't travel. So as much as we were going through our warehouse, we couldn't get out and replenish the warehouse.
Yes, exactly.
And by the time we really needed to replenish, cask pricing was astronomical.
Yeah.
And so we started looking around to sell the company. And we knew we needed to sell to somebody who had casks in their warehouse. And so we entered into negotiations with the Artisanal Spirits Company. They also own the Scotch Malt Whisky Society,
Okay.
and we negotiated with them for the majority of 2023. And there were a number of places where we had deal breakers, they had deal breakers, and we all respected one another's breaking points. And in January 4 of 2024, we signed the paperwork that officially sold the brand, the podcast, the Whiskey Jubilees, everything went to ASC ownership. But overnight, we went from having, depends how we're going to tell the story, but between 40 and 100 casks in the warehouse, at distilleries, dotted around the world, between 40 and 100, right? Tiny number.
Right.
We went from that to overnight having 17,000. Yes.
Whoa.
Yes. The thing that allowed Single Cask Nation to live was selling it to somebody who had 17,000 casks.
Yeah, and then absolutely.
Right. And then in the summer of 2024, we hit 18,000 casks. So we've got multiple warehouses to explore, and we are still talking to distillers. We are still sourcing direct from distillers and bringing new relationships on board. So with that said, once we got access to Artisanal Spirits Company warehousing, this 1999 Laphroaig was in our new parents' warehouse. And we were like, can we taste that one? Can we taste that one? Can we taste that one? And we tasted it and we said, can we have that one? Can we have that one? Can we have that one? And so we did. And so we absolutely wanted this for the nation. We absolutely wanted this to be a prestige bottling. We absolutely wanted to launch the new livery with a prestige offering. Mm-hmm. One of the things about us is we're not fancy bottle guys. We're not fancy box guys. I don't want to charge you $200 extra because there's a box, or because there's a fancy cork, or because I blew the glass with the bottle myself. Yep. Like I want to give you the bottle that the cork the label that is brand new and that we're celebrating, and I want the liquid to be the special aspect of this. And so we've come out prestige. It's a $600 25-year-old named Laphroaig single cask. It brings my journey full circle, right? From Finnish sauna with Petty P. Reinen at the University of Aberdeen Whisky Society, and now in December of 2025, I was active in the Aberdeen University Whisky Society when this was distilled, right?
Wow.
Right. It's that Ian Henderson was still the distillery manager at Laphroaig, right? We talk about them making this transition from this kind of that iodine, love it or hate it kind of Laphroaig to that more minerally gravel led Laphroaig. This for us is that transition period where you really get to taste some of the fruit that you would expect from a brewer's yeast, but then you get some of the minerality that you expect from where Laphroaig went in the 21st century. And again, I love being at that bridging point. Even Ian Henderson on his way to John Campbell. What John was maybe 2003, I think.
So this is the first sip I had of it because I wanted to wait until you finished your little story.
Cheers.
And I've had the opportunity to have Laphroaig 25 in the past. This blows it out of the water. I'm not going to lie. And of course, I don't remember it. It was probably 2018, something like that when I had it. This is just, and I tell people, like with older peated scotches, the smoke actually takes a back seat after a
Correct.
while. There is a breaking point. I think it's around the 15, don't quote me on it, around the 15-year mark, 15, 16-year mark, where it starts taking a little bit of the back seat and you get more of that fruit. You get more of the honeysuckle and all of these really nice, like, I don't even know how to explain it. Really, it's more like marzipan and like just all of these notes where you're like, that's in a peated scotch. But then also there's that just layer. It's like, you know how like when you smoke an old fashioned and that smoke just kind of lingers on the top, but this would be like lingering on the bottom, right? Where it's just an undertone of smoke, but it's like campfire. It's not like that super Band-Aid or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like with a Lefroy 10, you know what you're getting. And the Ardbeg Wee Beastie, the 5-year,
yeah.
it's super punchy, right?
Love it.
This is so subdued. I would give this, I mean, I would not give this to anybody. I'd drink it all myself because I'm a lush like that. But I would give this to somebody who maybe doesn't like smoke that much, because I feel like the balance between the fruit notes and the smoke is so cohesive. Obviously, it's been sitting in a cask for 25 years. It better be doing something in there. But at the same time, it's definitely Lefroy. You know what it is. But then the proof does not punch you. It's not punchy. It's very just mellow. And obviously, you could add a couple drops of water to this, or a lot of drops of water to this. I'm sure it would open up with a vibrant bouquet, as they say. But to me, as it is right now, with, you know, an eighth of an ounce in the glass, it is just presenting such a unique profile for Lefroy to where it makes me not want to drink anything else other than 25-year-old Lefroy. I'm sorry.
It's a fair position to be.
Right.
I'll say to your point, actually, and this was kind of part of the selection for us. This was all 25 years in a refill bourbon hogshead.
Oh,
so
wow.
a remade cask, larger than a bourbon barrel. But what you've got here is, in time, the wood hasn't gotten in the way of the spirit.
No.
And so the wood has framed it. There's char in there. Like you were saying, the wood smoke a moment ago, rather than that kind of iodine sphagnum moss kind of experience. That refill just allows the spirit to breathe. And one of the things that I really love is young refill bourbon cask Islas, where it's almost like you're drinking a 6-year-old new make spirit, or a 10-year-old new make spirit, right? And so this, to me, at 25, the wood has done a bit of work because it's been 25 years.
Right.
But in refill form, it's just kind of gently hugged that spirit. Absolutely. And just let that spirit become what it is. And Joshua and I both love that aspect of it.
Absolutely.
In selection for this.
And so my thing is, for all the listeners or viewers out there, obviously this bottle is going to be a more expensive bottle, right? Yeah. You just know by the age, you can kind of guess the pricing of it, right? But also this really showcases not only what Single Cask Nation is doing, but what Lefroy is doing, you know, like, again, and you guys aren't afraid. And luckily, like, you know, and we can talk about the SMWS all we want, but like having a number and having to go try and find somebody who might know what that number is, like, to me, it's a lot of it's not hard work, but it's like, you know, I got to figure, and then I'm constantly going back and forth, like to this page and this page and look at it, you know, and at least with you guys, and luckily Lefroy was nice enough to say, yes, you can do that thing, right? It's right there. It's blatant on the front of it, which makes it really, really cool and really unique. But it is unlike any other Lefroy that I've had. It is so just cohesive. That's all I can say. It's cohesive. It has enough peat there to let you know that you're drinking an Isla Scotch, but not so much that it's like, it's not Octomore level peat. It's just just enough to where you're like, especially right now, you know, we're cooling off. You know, this episode will air right after the new year, and you know, we're getting cool, and there's a lot of a lot of that going on. And like, this is the best dram to have sitting out by the fire or whatever. It's absolutely fantastic. I can't keep you any longer. I told you we were going to be an hour and we're way over that. So the last question I have for you tonight, and I feel like there's a part 2. I'd love to get Joshua on as well, and so we can have a little banter back and forth, because I think he would have other things to say. When somebody opens a bottle from Single Cask Nation 10 years from now, what do you hope that pour says about you?
Oh man, I tell you, Randall, your questions have been excellent tonight. I
mean, I'm a pro. What do you expect?
This is awesome. This is how Anna built you and Amanda built you, like, and Caitlin. It's like Randall's good people, and you have absolutely lived up to that. Your questions have been excellent.
I appreciate that.
Can I stall any longer in thinking about answering this question?
But keep hamming me up. Ham me up some more. It's fine.
I also have to say, you're talking about getting Joshua on. Get Jess on. Jess, our international sales manager in Glasgow.
Yes, I would love to.
Brilliant.
I would love to.
Absolutely brilliant.
I would love to.
She even sits in judging panels for competition. Like, that's
okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a lady who knows her stuff.
Absolutely. Sounds like it.
And we wouldn't be where we are globally without Jess, so we owe her as well.
Well, then that's the person I need to talk to. I need to talk to the boss.
See, there you go. There you know who runs the roost. All right. Who else can I big up while I'm thinking about an answer to this question? No, listen. It hasn't changed for us, right? We asked ourselves that question in 2011, right? Even in 2010, right? When Joshua says, "I want to start an independent bottling company. I want you to be my partner," right? Well, what's the first question? Well, why? Like, well, what are we going to say? What are we going to do, right? And so I'd like to think another 10 years from now, I hope it shows that we were passionate and we were committed to people, and we were committed to traditions, both old and new, because I firmly believe American single malt is working on a tradition.
It really is.
And I've said it, repeatedly. We're at the dawn of a new whiskey category. So cool. So very cool. And all the way through this global boom, we've seen the rise of Indian single malt and it being cherished and valued. We've seen the rise of Australian single malt. I could go on and on here, but you get my point, right? We have watched so many corners of this industry take off and fly. So I hope somebody thinks about what Single Cask Nation did amongst that, and how we championed people and distilleries, and we lifted the category, and we never once put anybody down, and we never once put anybody's whiskey down. Even if we didn't like it, even if we spotted flaws, we would have said the positive thing, and we would have tried to shine a light on the way forward, and not discouraged and not had somebody leave. So I hope we get remembered for that as well. And 10 years from now, I'll be 61. So I don't know if I'm retired at this point in 10 years.
No, I don't see it. Maybe you cut back a little bit, but other than that, I think you'll still be there. And I hope that we get to meet at that time and share a dram together personally. And that would be a lot of fun. So the question I asked everybody at the end, obviously, besides all the links that you want to tag on there, is, what was it? I lost. It's gone. Okay, never mind. It's fine. So if you want to give everybody your, where we can, if I wanted to buy a bottle of this, where would I go? And what about distribution? Because I know that is a big issue these days, getting distribution in the United States, especially because I live in Texas, which is a 3-tier state, and it has to go through all the rigmarole to get there. How can somebody pick up a bottle?
Yep. So a couple of different ways to do it here in America. We have the retail bottles. Specs in Texas, for example, does a lot of heavy lifting for us.
Okay.
We're always trying to get into, privately owned liquor stores in Texas as well. So we're not just playing in the big pool. Currently, I think we're in about 26 different US states. We have been since about 2017 when we launched the retail line. If you want us shipped direct to your doorstep, come to singlecasknation.com. If you see it there, it will only be there. The same as if you see it in retail, it is only in retail. So yeah, come to singlecasknation.com. You can actually see the list of states we're in retail wise. You can also see where we can ship direct to doorsteps as well. Give us a listen at One Nation Under Whisky as well. Found where all good podcasts are found. One Nation Under Whisky is the tagline of Single Cask Nation. And so we didn't get particularly creative for the podcast. We already had a line, so we used it. And then if you're tuning in globally, again, thanks to Jess Lomas, we're in Canada, Japan, the UK, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Australia, hopefully some new markets, global markets in 2026, as Jess continues to do yeoman's work, yo person's work. Yo person sounds like something very different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so yeah, we're always looking at new countries as well. So thanks a million for having me, Randall. This has been a blast. I had the audacity to ask you how long the interview would be, and then I gave you my usual long-winded answers. That every answer has 3 parts to it.
And I would want nothing other than that, because that is the truest part of the way I've listened to a bunch of your episodes, and I know that's just how it's going to go. And I always, my wife always tells me, if you're not in the house by 9 o'clock, I'm going to come get you and turn the computer off. So, I do have a hard stop, but it's sometimes we get pretty close to that. But I appreciate you so much for hanging out with me. I will have all of your stuff linked down below, and stick on real fast. I want to talk with you. But guys, it's by the time this comes out, it'll be a new year. Thank you so much for all the support and all the love. And I hope you guys had an excellent holiday. And if you're lucky enough to get this before the holidays, if you're on the Patreon or something like that, thank you very much for all that you do. And make sure you follow Single Cask Nation and get some of these bottles, because I can guarantee you that Lefroy 25 is going to sell out pretty fast. So go get you one right now. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to have to steal his, but All right, y'all be good. And until next time, cheers.